Like to welcome back one of my favorite basketball trainers to the Coach's Edge podcast, Coach Ryan Thomas, Hoopgrind basketball down in Jacksonville, Florida. Also the coach at Impact Christian Academy down in Jacksonville. Coach, thanks for taking the time to be on the Coach's Edge podcast.
Yeah, man, I'm excited to be back and talk some hoops with you.
For sure, for sure. I've always talk about, it's great to have mentors. We can learn a lot. There's self-development out there through listening to podcasts and books and all those different things, but there's nothing like just like peer-to-peer relationships with other people who are, going through different things. And I know, you've helped me a lot being able to just pick your brain as a fellow basketball trainer and business owner. I know you've helped me with the things I have going a lot. And I'm looking forward to you helping our listeners, right? As far as how they can help the players that they're coaching, they're working with as they start to prepare for basketball season. So I know this is going to be beneficial, not only for me, but for everybody else. You work with tons of players during the summer. You're traveling, running camps, but you also have a really strong local basketball training location in Jacksonville. For our listeners who haven't heard you before, why don't you give us just a real quick snippet of your basketball training, a little bit of your background, and then we're going to dive into, what fall preseason training can look like.
Yeah, for sure, man. Well, the feeling's definitely mutual, man. I appreciate our conversations. I learn something every time we talk. So that's been an amazing relationship to build. So I definitely appreciate you there, man. But just a little bit about myself. Like you said, I coach at Impact Christian Academy, which is a private school here in Jacksonville. Also the athletic director there. So wear a couple of hats with the school. And outside of that, founder of Hoopgrind Basketball. We have a training facility out here in Jacksonville Beach where we do year-round player development. So I am fortunate to do a lot of things that I love on a daily basis and work with a lot of great people. The staff at Impact is amazing. The trainers that I'm able to work with at Hoopgrind are amazing. So the opportunity to share your passion with people that are just as devoted to, development and mentorship as you are is just an awesome experience. So it's cool. And I get to travel too. I work with a program as a lead clinician, breakthrough basketball. So we do camps with them throughout the year. This past year I scaled back, but I still did about four camps kind of scattered throughout the country over the summertime with them, and get to go meet a whole new crop of kids. We normally have about 60 kids in the gym, and I'm working with coaches from a different area that I've never met before. We meet the day of the camp. We do a pre-camp powwow and get to know each other and set the foundation for the camp. But then we jump into it, we get after it. So that's been a blessing as well. So all fun things, man.
Great opportunities to continue to learn, as a basketball coach, when you get to see players, whether it's weekly, whether it's one time and you're seeing how they play, and maybe you're on the camp in, Minnesota, for example, and it's like, I've never met these kids, and what's the style of play up here compared to being in Florida, and then you go to Texas and what is the style of play over here. Tons of great things we can learn from our players. What does working with a player look like during the fall compared to what a workout and what training may look like for them during the summer? I mean, what are some of the similarities and differences?
So there's definitely a lot of similarities, in the summer, and then as you roll towards the fall, as far as the foundations of what we do, high intensity. We want to simulate the game as much as possible, and we want translatable skills, right? So when we work in the summertime, we're trying to create the foundation for what we'll be doing through the summer into the fall with those kids that we're working with here on a consistent basis. So we've got targeted goals that we're trying to hit throughout the summer. But the summertime, we do a little bit more to kind of add to our game, so we'll take a little more time to kind of pinpoint some weaknesses and try to strengthen those up. over the summer. When we get to like fall development, we really start to hone in on what is your specific role with your team and how can you utilize your strengths to get on the court and keep yourself on the court. So we hit a lot of those strengths, and then we cover a lot of liabilities as well. So you look at strengths, weaknesses, and liabilities. When you get to the fall, we're hitting strengths, and because that's what's going to get us on the court and keep us on the court. But then we try to cover those liabilities because those are the things that are going to get you pulled out of games.
Right.
So that's probably the main difference. We do ramp up our conditioning elements as we get closer to the season, because we want our athletes to be primed and ready to go and in the best shape possible as they roll into the season. The other adjustment that we make is we do less live contact the closer we get to the season.
Yeah.
We still have game action. We still have like guided defense. They'll still do some competitive stuff, but it's less live contact just because we want to limit injuries. I don't want anybody blowing out an ankle or a knee going into tryouts and conditioning with their team.
No, it's great stuff. And I want to go back to one thing you mentioned in the very beginning when you mentioned targeted goals for players during the summer. What's an example of a targeted goal you'd have for a player that you get to work with on a consistent basis?
So again, we're looking at what their role is with their team, where they're currently at, and what role they're trying to step into. So if they're looking to extend their range and become, that consistent outside shooter for their team, we're going to put a specific plan in place to track and monitor their progress. We're going to try to get them to be a green light shooter for their team, and we'll build out programming, and we'll put benchmarks along the way. Like, you're a red light shooter here because you're whatever 10 for 30 from the 3-point line with nobody guarding you. Then you're a yellow light shooter. When you bump that up 20 out of 30, you get to become a green light shooter. And we put in those targets so we can hit the goals and obtain the role that we want when we roll up into the season.
So what Coach is talking about here, I did a quick podcast episode on where I talked about the difference. Let's use shooting as an example of like a shot club versus a shot challenge and some of the pros and cons of each. And I think what Coach is breaking down with these targeted goals and green light would be more along the challenge side of like, hey, this is a challenge of being able to knock down X amount of shots, out of 30 or for time, different things like that. And I just love coaching that way because you could put time to it. You can put score to it compared to, hey, I got 20,000 shots up this summer. Great. Were they specific to your game? Were they specific to the shots that you're going to be taking next season? Right. That can be a little misleading when it's just sheer quantity, right? Compared to like these targets. I think we can really dial things in and get specific for the players and how they're going to have those responsibilities and be successful throughout the course of the season. So I love that. You talked about building up the condition of players as they get into, closer to the season, while still starting as the season starts to approach, dialing back some of the live contact. What are some of the things that you do to improve their game condition while pulling back some of the, maybe less one-on-one or 3-on-3, whatever that might be?
Yeah, no, you're hitting it right on the head. Like, we'll do conditioning, like full court one-on-one stuff. We'll do that. That's more of a summer conditioning type workout because we want skill development and game application in our conditioning components. So we'll go from doing something like that in the summer to putting in more time-based challenges in the fall. So like sideline shooting, you're going from the corner 3 on one end to the corner 3 on the other end. Catch and shoot jump shots, you got 2 minutes. We're trying to hit 15 or better catch and shoot threes from the corners. So we'll start to put in those time challenges. And that's kind of a blocked practice, but we'll also do like variable. You'll go for 3 minutes and you've got, 4 different game actions that you're getting shots off of. So maybe you're coming off of a ball screen into a pull up, then you're running into a flare screen, and then you set a pin down and open up, and then you come back off of like a stagger screen. So you're getting like 4 different basketball actions, and you're just running through that progression for 2 to 3 minutes, and we'll get conditioned that way. And you're getting conditioning, but you're also getting the game application in that scenario, where now I've got to be able to execute, playing with pace, being able to come off and make shots, control my dribble while I'm a little bit tired. And so that's kind of how we'll shift our conditioning elements, and we'll start to get away from the contact part of it.
You speak my language, talking block practice, variable practice, time and score. Let's keep rolling on, some of these different training methodologies here, as far as, how do you, when you're not putting as many individual players out there as far as competing, what are some ways that you're still able to randomize the training so that players have to make game-like decisions, right? If I have a live defender out here, well, no rep is going to be exactly the same, right? As far as who am I playing against, the spot, are they early, are they late, how much space do I have? When we're taking some of that physical contact away, a lot of times we can start to take away some of the decisions being made. How do you start to implement that in other ways so that players are still able to work on their decision-making skills?
Yes. So some of it is, as simple as giving them either a verbal cue or a hand signal, a visual cue. You come off this ball screen. If my hand's down, you're pulling up. If my hands are up, maybe hesitation and get to the basket. So you've got those auditory and visual cues that you can use. But one of the things that we started to do with some of our like our scoring guards is we'll set them up in a position where we're coming off of ball screens, and you're trying to get to this action with simulated defense. Maybe we'll put pop-ups or a box out there where, this is a defender in drop coverage. So we're going to come off, we're going to maybe put our defender in jail as we come off the screen, and then we'll snake to this open pocket over here. However, as they're going through that action, at any moment, I can tell them to shoot it. Right. So now, as they come off looking into that action, they've got to be mindful. Every dribble is a dribble to score. Right. So now I'm changing the way that I handle the ball. I'm changing the way that when the ball's in my hands, I'm ready for a pickup, because I don't know, maybe I come and attack that screen and the defender jumps underneath. Right. And I've got to be ready to make that read and ready to shoot the ball. And they won't be able to see the defense do that, but they've got to know that, okay, my dribbles, as I approach this, coach could call a shot anytime, right? Even as they approach the screen before they even get into it, maybe the defender's playing lazy, hands down, backing up, we're shooting the three. And now if I don't say anything and there's no call, they just run the action that I've asked them to run predetermined, and they're just going to put them in jail, snake it, get to their spot, get into the shot that we've called.
This is great stuff. I love. That's a great way to do it. I love anything where you're keeping the kids like mentally engaged while they're out there playing, by changing up a verbal cue, hand signal. We've even done like some counting stuff, which is a little bit more variable side, but where kids have to, like, hey, if it's 1, we're going to jab, but then we're not going to jab again until 2. And again, we're not going to do it till 3. Say like you're mixing up different dribble moves, but then when we get to a certain number, hey, that's when you're going to cross. So now kids they don't get the roboticism of 2 reps, do this, 2 reps, do this. Right. It's like, no, it's changing every single repetition when you're going to work on a jab step or a certain move, things like that. I love that. Talk about, any players. I mean, you have, I think you just worked with a player who, correct me if I'm wrong, was like McDonald's All-American, right? Going to play at the Division I level. You work with a lot of high-level players. You work with players that go on to play basketball overseas, and a variety of players are just really successful at the high school level. What's something that you notice common characteristics among those great players?
Yeah, man, we've been very fortunate to work with some really, really special players, some high level players. And you're right, they all seem to have some very similar characteristics. And to be honest with you, like, some of it is athleticism, some of it is their size, some of it is just coordination, like stuff that God gave them, right? Like they're born with this. But the majority of it is that mental side of it, where the way that they approach the game. So like just their competitiveness, right? They're ultra competitive. You always hear stories about Kobe and Michael Jordan, and like it's they're competitive on the basketball court, but they're competitive in everything, right? Like they take winning seriously. Um, and that shows in the way that they train and in the way that they play, right? A lot of times you'll watch average players and they're trying stuff that they've never practiced before. Like they've never got this rep before, but they're going to go out in the game and just try it anyway. Um, I think that there is a little bit to be said about creativity, but most of these kids, like, they're not taking shots that they haven't taken before because they want to see a successful result, right? Like I'm shooting this shot because I know it's about to go in, and that type of confidence is another side of it, right? Like the confidence that they shoot the ball with is different than some lower level players. Like we're shooting this hoping it goes in versus I'm shooting it knowing like I'm shooting it because I think it's going to go in. um and going back to Kobe, like you hear stories about him, like everybody says he's a ball hog, but it's not that, right? He earned the ability to take these shots, right? Like I go to practice and I'm there 2 hours before you show up 10 minutes before practice, and I'm already in a full sweat, been through a whole workout. Why would I give you a shot that you haven't earned? You don't take the game serious enough, right? So I think that's a huge part of it. I do believe that those high level players, that they are willing to take risks, um, and not in the way where it's something that they're unprepared for, but they're going to take risk. Like when they're working out, they're going to try to push themselves and get outside their comfort zone, where other kids have like this fear of failure. Like they don't want to do stuff that they're not good at. They don't want to do things that they aren't comfortable with. But high level players, like they're going to try it. They're going to mess up, and that's going to drive them to try it again. Whereas a lower level player you might be able to talk them into trying it, but once they mess up, that's it. They're moving on from that. When they go home, they're not trying this on their own.
Is there a way that you're able to, you see a kid with talent, potential, but that seems to be what's holding them back, is not maybe even their skills, it's their mind, right? It's their mentality, that growth mindset. Are there some ways that you're able to try to get that out of them so that they can then, really, in a sense, unleash themselves and be open to failure, right? You mentioned failure. I got failure written on my shirt, actually.
I love it. Yeah.
Funny as we're recording this. Is there a way you're able to coach kids through and start to, grow them in that area that they're struggling?
Yeah, I think I think the ones where you see that being the case, right? Like they have the skill set, they have the potential to be that type of player. You can tell, right? And then it's really just about a willingness, right? My thing is hit it head on, right? Like talk to them about the fear, right? Like fear eliminates your growth, right? So you gotta get rid of the fear of failure, the fear of embarrassment, the fear of getting beat, the fear of looking foolish, like all those things, especially in today's culture, right? With social media, like people are so concerned about ego and how they look. So we got to hit that on the head as soon as it pops up and you see that being an issue. Like, let's address it. And then you can kind of gauge, all right, like they understand a little bit. And now we're going to set benchmarks in place, right? So they can see the success, right? Like, okay, today you can't really do this, right? You might be successful 1 out of every 10 times you try it, but we're going to stay with it, right? We're going to put a package in place with these concepts so you can continue to rep it out. And then we're going to track your growth, right? Because that's what kids need to see. They need to see themselves being successful, right? If I don't believe that I can do it and I haven't seen demonstrated proof that I can grow in this area, then I'm not going to step out of that fear. I'm going to continue to live in it. And, we're going to take the path of least resistance, and I'm going to run from that fear, the kind of the fight or flight.
Yeah, 100%, coach. You gotta, and when a kid does, maybe it's 1 rep out of 5 where you saw them just like let loose and be what they could be, whether they made a mistake doing it or not, praise them, right?
Yep.
Praise them for, and again, like we always say at our camps, like the biggest mistake you can make today is not making any, because it means you're not getting out of your comfort zone. Well, how are we going to improve if we don't get out of there? Right. So making that the standard is to make mistakes, and to be able to demonstrate that, whether it's yourself, whether it's another player who is at that level, and you get a training partner in there. Like, I just think of, we have a former college players that come in and they help us with our training sessions with the younger players we're working with. When I got one of our former college players and she's doing a crossover drill and she loses the ball, I'm like, see, this was a former Division I basketball player. She just lost the ball. What's your excuse for not losing the ball? Right? Because she's busting her butt, getting after it, pushing herself, right? And she don't feel bad. She's just like, dang, give me that ball back. I'm gonna keep going. It's important for us to just get in an environment where that becomes the mentality. And I think that once we put players in that type of position, now they realize, boy, they're almost out of place by being so self-absorbed in the fact that, boy, I got to be perfect because none of these other players are being there. That's like a truly a culture that takes time to build. I think it's probably even more difficult I wouldn't say more difficult. I think it's different. Myself, yourself, we're working with players from different backgrounds, different schools, maybe don't know each other. Whereas a high school coach listening, like you can have, players that you can look to. You have an environment, a little more of a comfort of like, this is the gym that we're training out of at our school, and building some of that comfort level within. I just think there's some differences there, but super, super valuable. When you work with, sorry about that side tangent.
Oh, no, you're good. Praising the process, man. I think that's super important.
100%. You mentioned, fear eliminates growth. Fear eliminates growth. I think that's a really, really insightful statement. Are there examples of players that you've trained in the past that you're now able to teach and give examples of the players you're currently training?
Yeah, I think that's the beauty of, for me, having either players that I've coached in high school that have gone on to college and had success, that, players in our program, they look to, right? And those players come back because we've kind of created that environment where those players want to come back. They want to be a part of our family still, like, and that's what we are. We're a family, right? So to be able to tell the story from the coaching standpoint, but then also to have those athletes come back and say, hey man, yeah, I couldn't do this. Like the way that we practice here, the way that we work, I wasn't ready for it when I first got here, but just trusting the process and running my head into the wall a few times and learning as we go and seeing the growth that, the process creates. That's huge, right? And for the athlete to be able to share that with, a younger player that's running into the same issues, I think that's huge for them. And I kind of use the same model with my training program, right? Like we break up our group workouts based on kind of maturity level, for the most part, but every once in a while we throw some of those younger fish with the bigger fish, and because they need to see it, right? They need to see it. Even our better high school players, like they need to be in workouts with current college players and overseas pros, because the level of work is different, right? The level of focus is different as you grow in levels, right? Because if you can't maintain that standard, you're not going to make it. So we try to expose them and let them see, like, okay, this is what success looks like.
Mhm.
And it's not always clean, it's not always neat, it doesn't always follow the same pattern, but there's clues along the way, right? We try to show them, okay, these are the clues that success leaves behind. It's your job to pick up on them and embrace them.
Mhm. For players to be able to hear it, to see it, to feel what that looks like is huge, and to have the timeline that you've had where players can come back and share some of their strengths, their successes, also some of their failures, and open up. What a great tool that is. And for all of our coaches, regardless of whether it's player development or anything else, if you can get your players to get a little uncomfortable and share, some of the highs and lows of their playing career, what a great opportunity that is for the next generation to come up. And I love that that is a key piece of what you guys are doing.
Yeah.
Coach,
Take them to a college practice, man. Just let them see. Let them see what it looks like. Let them hear what it sounds like. If you have chances for your kids to talk to some of those college players, like their stories aren't that much different, you know. Everybody kind of goes through a very similar process. There's the top 5% that are just different, and their struggles aren't the same as everybody else's, but the majority of us, we hit the same walls, we feel the same thing. It's just, how you handle it along the way that determines your ceiling.
Coach, how long have you been basketball training?
So since about 2009 is when I started to stick my feet in the water, probably like knowing that this is the career path that I want. And I see it and I can feel it probably since 2012.
Gotcha. So, I mean, you've been involved in some way, shape, or form for about 14 years, right? What are some of the changes or differences that you've noticed in kids over the years of doing player development?
Yeah, so I think in general, man, kids are way more athletic and way more skilled than they've ever been. And I think that trend is just going to continue. But many of them are less productive on the court, right? So we've got players that can do way more now than anybody has ever been able to do. Like you just go watch old NBA clips, right? There's always the comparison, like, would this player be successful nowadays? I think, some of those players would be successful, but in large, the amount of skill and the athleticism has changed so much in recent history. And I think a lot of it is resources and knowledge, right? You have knowledge at your fingertips. There's trainers everywhere. YouTube videos teach people what to do. We take athletics more seriously now than we ever have in the past. Most legit players and even, average players are in the weight room, working on their body. It's cool to have a foam roller or a Theragun, or, recovery is now a thing that is something that people bought into.
That's a great point right there. That's true. It's almost like cool to recover. I like that.
Yeah. 10 years ago, like it was almost, maybe a little longer than that, but it was almost like people look down on you.
Yeah, you're soft.
If you showed weakness, right? Like when we played ball in college, like, yeah, if you got to go to the trainer, like, man, come on, suck it up. You'll be all right.
100%. Yeah.
From your teammates, from your coaches, from your family, like, yeah, you'll be all right, man. What are you being soft for?
Tough it out.
So I think that stuff has changed, man. But I think that we are holding kids back in certain ways on the productivity side, right? So, like in terms of youth athletes, youth coaches, I feel like at times, and not the good ones, but at times they hinder the development of younger players. Sometimes it's like egos and chasing trophies is the most important thing over development. And, you and I, we're huge development guys. So we're obviously a little bit different on our outtake with youth athletics. But then outside of egos and chasing trophies, they're setting themselves up and pigeonholing kids at a young age, right? I'm putting my tallest kid next to the basket. I'm going to give my fastest, most athletic kid the ball and let them dominate the game. Everybody else is kind of left to the wayside, right? So I think that it hurts us, right? Those bigger, faster, stronger kids, and even the taller kids, they're not being developed. They're using what they currently have to be the end all be all of their game, right? And then the kids that aren't in that category are almost left in the dust, right? It's like they're not getting any attention, they're not getting any development, and they don't see the success on the court, right? So that's a blow to their confidence, right? Because you got their mom and dad or their parent or their guardian, you know, telling them like, you need to be more aggressive, you need to shoot it, you need to shoot it. But that's not what their coach wants to see, right? And they're not putting them in a position where they can get good shots, right? They're more like, just let's space this thing out. We'll run 4 out, dribble drive, but really we just want to get this one kid downhill so we can go get a layup. So I think with youth athletics, that kind of hinders us because people don't really understand the game, right? We're not teaching them concepts, actions, reads. We're saying, okay, this is the strengths of this team. Let's utilize it like a varsity high school coach would probably do, right? But that's not the case at that young age. You know, it should be developing your entire roster and teaching them how to play the game versus, you know, going to chase a trophy.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. I couldn't agree more. I just think that there's so much that can still be attained and developed. I mean, you talked about players being more skilled and just the talent level. There's so much more we know about recovery, as you mentioned. There's so many positives, but at the same time, there's a lot of things that we still have a long way to go in the development world as far as working with kids, especially at the youth level, that I think can make them more successful down the road. There's no question about that.
Yeah, I agree 100%, man. And even when you jump those kids up into the middle school level and the high school level, like I feel like we have issues there, right? So a lot of times for me, it's almost too structured for those kids, right? Like I study a lot of the player development stuff, and I watch a lot of trainings and workouts, and it's almost like it's too clean, right? Like we're running this one quote unquote move, right? This is what we're focusing on. And we've set up the perfect scenario for it, right? And we're going to do this over and over and over. And a lot of times, you know, the perfect scenario doesn't include defense. You know, we might tell them the defense is standing here, but it's a cone, right? So I can do the skill, right? But you start to put the variables that you'll see in a game out there with extra defense, with reaching hands, defenders moving their feet, teammates cutting, like they're not prepared for that because they've never seen it in their preparation. They see it in their games when they're supposed to be performing, but they've never seen it in their preparation. So that's like when we think about practice players, right? You can put them in any drill, ask them to do any skill, and they look amazing. But then the productivity just isn't there because they don't understand the concepts of when to utilize it, how to utilize it, and which move am I supposed to be going to here, coach? Like they don't have that perfect, concrete, clean environment to do that in a game. And I feel like that's where we need to make the shift in our philosophies as coaches and as trainers. Is it's okay for some things to look chaotic, right? Like it's okay to have a messy segment because the game is messy, right? Like everybody in America has sets, but the sets almost never work, right? Like we can put them in positions to run these plays, and we can draw them up, diagram them, put them in the perfect spot, but the variables almost always get in the way, right? It's great when they work. You look like a genius, but when they break down, do you have players that understand how to play, right? Can they be productive on the court because they understand concepts? They've got a skill set that they can use. They are athletic, but do we have that whole package where they understand what we're trying to get out there on the court?
Preaching right here. I mean, if for anybody listening, feel free to rewind the past, 5 minutes or so, what Coach Thomas had to share. I think that was just excellent stuff and that coaches at all levels can apply to the players that they're working with, whether you're a basketball trainer, AAU coach, high school basketball coach. Those are huge. And, the one thing that I would add that this would probably go into when you talked about some of the mental side and the competitive nature of the high level, the high performers that you have. What's one of the differences that you see between those high performers and some of the average and below average players is that hunger level and the sense of entitlement. And so what I mean by that is like those really successful players, they're hungry, they're competitive, they're ready to get after it, right? They want to beat you. It doesn't matter if it's like a 1-on-1, a 3-on-3, or if it's like the first person to make 5 layups. Right. They're competitive. They want to win. Who's going to finish tying their shoes first. Right. So that's a big difference, like just that hunger and that competitive drive. And then the other thing that I've noticed with some of the best players that I've worked with is they're more like grateful. They're more present. They take the time that they have and they use it, with much more resourcefulness. Right. They don't take anything for granted. Right. Whereas you would think those are the high level players, they would start to take things for granted, but that's what made them so good in the first place is because they don't. Right. And then you get the average or below average players and like, yeah, it's, another workout, another AAU practice. It's another practice throughout the course of the season. And as coaches, we need to make sure that we do a really good job of teaching our players. Don't take a day, a moment, a rep for granted, right? Do the very best that you can. It doesn't mean it's going to be successful, right? The success is the fact that you didn't take it for granted. You tried to get the most out of it that you could. If we can start to build a team like that, that's not only going to be more fun, because you want to be around people like that. We all want to be around high performers, right? Unless you're not a high performer, then you get scared away by people like that, right? But if you're going to be on a good team, if you can build an environment where everybody's like that, that's just more success and just more fun in general to be around people like that. I love it. It's all been great stuff. Coach, something that, I have conversations with varsity basketball coaches this time of year is they usually have, and I'll give you a scenario and you can just paint the picture however you like. But a lot of varsity coaches may have 3 workouts a week, and maybe they only have 45 minutes to an hour with each group that they get to work with. And maybe it's 4 players or 3 players, depending on what state you're in. There's a bunch of different rules, what you can do. Florida has different rules than South Carolina, than Michigan, Ohio, whatever it might be. So very vague general question. So just you take that and just run with it however you want. But if you were to go about creating a workout program for 4 weeks, 6 weeks before basketball season were to come along for some varsity level basketball players, what are some of the things that you would make sure you would get after and do, even though, you're not in that coach's shoes of what defense they run, what offense they run, so on and so forth?
Yeah. So for me, man, I'm a firm believer in depth over width. So, and what I mean by that is I would want to dive into specific concepts, right? I'd rather see great gains in 1 to 2 areas versus incremental growth in 7 or 8 areas, right? I'd rather be really, really good at a couple of things, right? So I can, our program, we've got something to hang our hat on, right? And for our individual players, they've got something to hang their hat on as well. I think you build confidence that way, right? We've got some concepts that we know will work. I've got a skill set that I know will work. It builds confidence for our players because they can execute it. And it builds confidence for our coaches because we know that, we understand this action, we understand this concept. And when we need to make a play, that we can go to this, right? So if I build my program out and I stack, multiple months on top of each other where we're really focusing on, okay, this month we've got these 2 concepts that we're focusing on. And then the next month, we've got these two concepts that we're focusing on. You do that, and you've got, if you're a year-round program and you go about it the right way, you can really develop some great gains over the course of a preseason to a complete season in your postseason workouts. I think that's huge, man. It's just really diving into it. To get a little more specific, right? If I'm a coach, I'm going to prioritize my groups based on the skills that I need in our offense or in our actions, right? So just thinking about offensively, if I break my groups into like my ball handlers or my initiators, and then I break another group into my slashers, then I break another group of just my shooters, and then I break a group up of my bigs. Now, that's kind of how I would group them up. And that gives me the opportunity to focus solely on these 1 to 2 concepts with them, right? So for my ball handlers, if I'm trying to get them to get downhill and get in the paint and make decisions, right? I've got them all in the same group. That's what everybody's focusing on in this group, right? For my slashers, if I'm trying to get in their heads of making those half-second decisions, right? Now my training with that group is all in, okay, I catch it, I'm looking to shoot it, drive it, pass it. And it's a half-second decision. So that's what our focus is with that group. For our shooters, if we're working to extend their range and attack closeouts, right? That's our focus for that entire month. Our bigs, maybe we're working dribble handoffs and ball screens. And so I narrow our focus down with those groups. And now I know my bigs are awesome out of handoffs, right? I know I've got shooters that can make a decision on a closeout. My slashers, they're going to make quick, decisive decisions. My ball handlers can get in the paint and they can make plays for everybody. If they can't, they can go right into a ball screen or a dribble handoff, right? And so in my group workouts, we would have everybody, we would get our pre-practice stretch and our form shooting in, right? Because everybody needs those skills. We would have a package of just team footwork that everybody would get into every session, right? So if we're talking about a jab series or like up fakes in the post, playing out of up and unders, step throughs, we would have that as part of your group workout. Then you go into your positional work, whatever those concepts are that you're focusing on. And then your post-practice, I'm sorry, I flipped that. Your post-practice is your form shooting. Your pre-practice is your stretching and your ball handling. So we pre-practice, stretch, ball handling. Then we get into our team footwork. Then we get into our positional work. And then we end it with our post-practice form shooting.
Gotcha. Good outline of what a workout could look like for your players, and love how you gave examples for everyone. So those are some great nuggets, because I know, especially with the style of play that we have, whether teams are playing 5 out, 4 out, there's just everybody's trying to utilize space, right? And so the ways that you broke down those positions and some of those responsibilities and roles for players was tremendous. Favorite shooting drill that you're doing right now with your players, coach?
So stole it from somewhere, and it's called the Bradley Beal drill. Basically you get 2 minutes and 30 seconds. You got to go around the perimeter. You have 5 spots. You got to make 2 in a row from all 5 spots. Once you get all the way around the perimeter, that gives you 10 points. Whatever time is left on the clock, you pick your favorite spot and you're shooting. Every make from that last spot counts as a point. So 5 total spots around the perimeter, your corner, wing, top, wing, corner. You got to make 2 in a row from each spot to move on to the next spot. Once you've hit 2 in a row from all 5 spots, that gives you 10 points. Then you could stay in that corner, or you could go to wherever your bread and butter spot is, and your catch and shoot from that spot, and every make at that spot counts as a point.
That's a fun one. I like that one. I haven't done that one, but we're going to have to try that out with some of our guys and girls. I like that. I've tried it out myself. The Bradley Beal drill.
Bradley Beal. I have a feeling I stole it from Drew Hanlon. Bradley Beal.
Probably. Yeah, that's who Beal's working out with. So
that would be my guess.
That's a good one too.
But yeah, I love adding that time constraint, putting some pressure on. to get back-to-back makes. I think that's a great way to do it. I think we need to add more, more of a sense of urgency to when players are training. Keep them locked in, keep them engaged, make everything meaningful. Every shot matters, right? Like I'm narrowing my focus and I'm solely locked in on this shot.
The time and score is something that I think a lot of coaches are doing, which is great. And we have some shooting drills that we do where, there's the pressure of like that streak. And I think that this is a really good example of, it's not make two shots and move on. It's two in a row. So you make that first one, there's that little more game-like pressure, right? Of hey, I got to knock this shot down. Otherwise I'm back at zero. I got to make two in a row again. Like how much time I'm going to lose. So that's another great variable to add to shooting workouts, specifically. And 2.5 minutes is plenty of time for players to get, some of that cardio in as far as being able to shoot long enough. And they're going to start to feel some of that, some of that pressure, and also just get the juices flowing, right? They're going to be breathing hard. They're going to be pushing. So that's excellent right there. Coach, we keep talking shooting drills, player development, all this stuff. We could go on, and I know, our conversations aren't gonna stop anytime at all, but thanks for taking the time. Tell our listeners a little bit of where they can learn more about what you have going on.
Yeah, for sure, Coach. I love it. We could be out here all day. But you can follow me on all the major social medias at Hoopgrind, HOOPGRIND. Always open to learning new things, growing my network. I love just to build and learn, man. I'm a hoop junkie. There's tons of knowledge out there, and I'm far from knowing it all. I'm always trying to find new ways to improve and help people grow.
I appreciate that, Coach. And, I think there's a difference between, what they say, being like book smart and street smart, right?
Mm-hmm.
One is just knowledge that's in your brain. The other one is like, I'm an active participant in my learning, right? And what I love about you is you're both. And I think we all want to be both, right? We want to be these students where we're reading and we're watching video and we're asking questions. And this podcast, an example, I get the chance to learn a lot from you. And so being able to take in this information is huge for all of us as coaches, but also the real life application, right? The street smart aspect of it. Like, you got to go yourself out as a coach, try some of this stuff that Coach Thomas has shared, right? And start to think about, listening to this podcast and ask yourself, what could I have done better for my players the next time? What did I give them that was maybe a little too advanced, right? Maybe that was pretty easy. We can start to hit the gas a little bit more, right? And decide, do I hit the gas? Do I hit the brakes? What needs more detail? What are kids figuring out on their own? Now I can just shut up and give them, a 20-second soundbite instead of going on for 2 or 3 minutes.
Yeah.
You got to be a practitioner as well as being able to take in new information. And that's the sweet spot for all of us, right? There's a lot of people out there who are just consuming, but they're not creating, right? And there's other people they're creating, but they're not consuming new information, which means they're just creating based on what they already know. And they're not trying to be a student of the game and learn. So then that becomes, well, this is just how we've always done it. Why? Well, I don't really have a good reason. That's just what my coach did for me 20 years ago. And so that's what the drill that we do too, right? You're coaching, but we got to grow. If you can combine both, right? The consuming, the creating, the book smart, the street smart. I mean, that's the recipe for success that I think all of us as coaches want to have, and the type of people that we want to build, that we get the chance to work with. And you are that person, Coach, which is why I highly respect you. Getting the chance to talk hoop with you every time. I started out with following you guys on Instagram, and I was like, I like what this guy's putting out there. And now it's built into a distant friendship, which I appreciate. So thanks again, Coach. This has been great. To our Coach's Edge listeners, appreciate you. Get after today.
Yes, sir. Appreciate you, Coach. Thank you.